Republican, and we want to get your thoughts this morning, Congressman, on the president's request.
Good morning. Great to be with you. It's really incredible that the president would respond to 32 trillion rather, national debt, the highest percentage of debt to GDP we've had since World War II, the reckless amount of spending that's caused record deficits during his administration, 10 trillion in new spending. And then the massive inflation that he's caused, and then his administration responds by raising interest rates, not to combat a strong economy that's overheating, but to combat the inflation he's caused by his spending, which is causing more effective inflation on Americans as they try to buy homes and other things that are financed. And then the president thinks the proper response to that is a $6.9 trillion budget, highest proposed budget in the history of the country, about $2 trillion more than forecast revenues, which are right around $5 trillion. Record revenues coming in because of the Trump tax cuts. But yet this president is determined to double down on his policies. The amount of spending he's proposed at $6.9 trillion is more than $20,000 per U.S. citizen. Think about that. How would the American people feel about the president borrowing and spending in their name $20,000 and then handing them the IOU for them or their kids or their grandkids? Unbelievable how the president is responding, not to mention his massive increase in taxes. This proposed budget, of course, will never see the light of day in the House of Representatives. We're going to cut our spending and put us on a path to fiscal responsibility.
Congressman, how will Republicans cut spending to address the deficit, and can you do it without touching Social Security and Medicare?
Well, there's a tremendous amount of low-hanging fruit, if you will. We were only spending $4.4 trillion. I say only, crazy to put that in front of trillions of dollars, but $4.4 trillion pre-COVID, just a few years ago, 4 fiscal years ago, and the revenue's now at $4.9 trillion, highest in history. You would be realizing a $500 billion surplus, paying down the debt with that $500 billion if we just were spending at the levels of pre-COVID. So what we want to do in the Republican side is we want to cut spending to pre-COVID levels on non-defense discretionary spending. When you keep defense where it's been projected to be for this year already, then that allows us to go to 2022 overall. That will save us almost $150 billion a year. But then also we want to cancel or rescind President Biden's $400 billion student loan transfer scheme, where he wants to make borrowers who didn't borrow the money have to pay for student loans for somebody else. There's about $100 billion of unspent, unobligated COVID funds that we want to rescind the $80 billion for the 87,000 IRS agents. And then there's tens of billions of more in his phony infrastructure bill, as well as the inflation increase bill that he passed last year, that where there's tens and tens of billions, if not even hundreds of billions, of wasteful climate, environmental, green raw deal stuff that we need to claw back as well. So with cutting that in the immediate, you can get to close to $1 trillion, well north of $500 billion. That will make an immediate impact this year. And then if you cap the spending at the 2022 levels that I said, where you cut non-defense discretionary to 2019 and keeping defense at the 2024 level, that's going to save, again, $150 billion a year. And then we go back to pro-growth policies like we had under President Trump. We begin to reinstate the welfare work requirements that President Biden has eliminated to get Americans back to work. As you know, we have a 60% labor participation rate, lowest in the history of the country.
That is just on the discretionary side of the ledger, though, Congressman. What about that mandatory spending for Social Security and Medicare?
Well, there is one area of agreement, I guess. The president has said he doesn't want to cut benefits in Medicare and Social Security. Republicans don't either. We have committed to that. Future Congress and future president is going to have to come together to preserve and protect Social Security and Medicare for future generations. You and I both know it's set to go bankrupt within 10 years. So we've got to come together on a bipartisan basis to do that. But I don't think we can start there. You can't, with all this reckless, wasteful spending that's driven up the national debt on the discretionary side, you can't come to America's seniors and say, hey, we're going to cut this on your back, if you will. But what we're going to do is cut the wasteful, reckless spending that's there. There's so much of it there. There's hundreds of billions of dollars. The American people don't think we ought to be borrowing and spending. And I'll just point back to the $113 billion we sent to Ukraine last year, which equates to $260 million per congressional district. I don't think that would poll well in most congressional districts. Those citizens want to send $260 million of their borrowed money to Ukraine. And this president's got $7-8 billion more in this budget to send to Ukraine with no exit strategy, no end game, no plan for when the American involvement ends or how this crisis is eventually resolved over there with Russia's brutal, ruthless invasion of Ukraine.
Politico is reporting, Congressman, that the Pentagon is going to ask Congress for a new $15.3 billion plan in order to increase its presence in the Pacific to respond to aggression from China. Do you agree with that spending?
I don't, because we've got almost a $900 billion defense budget, which is the equivalent of the next 9 countries in the world combined. We want to be number one. We want to be the absolute toughest, strongest, most lethal fighting machine, so nobody ever wants to challenge us. We've got to get rid of the president's climate, environmental, woke DEI things in the defense budget that's weakening our military, the vaccine mandate impact on the troops who are still suffering from that, that's caused us to meet just a fraction of our recruiting goals. So we want to be at the absolute strongest, toughest military, but we shouldn't consider it a sacred cow that can't be challenged. It's failed every audit that's ever been conducted on it in modern times. You can't have $900 billion and not have some level of some kind of waste and inefficiencies. It's got to be, again, about the most lethal fighting machine and not about projects in somebody's district or a jobs program or where the special interest spending or just some kind of a blind loyalty to the industrial military complex. It's got to be about efficiencies and effectiveness. So the defense needs to be looked at too. Number one priority of the federal government is keep us safe and secure. And defense and homeland security has got to be at the top of that list. But that doesn't mean when you're $32 trillion in national debt and the president's trying to run us another $2 trillion in deficit this year, that you don't have the luxury not to look at defense for ways that we can improve and be more effective and efficient with our spending.
Congressman, preview the fight over raising the debt ceiling. Will it be tied to spending and the budget?
I don't think there's any question that Republicans will not raise the debt ceiling without commensurate cuts in spending. That would be reckless. That would be foolish. That would be irresponsible. Speaker McCarthy and Republicans are united in approaching this in a responsible manner. The president has been irresponsible in saying he wouldn't negotiate. That was his first posture. Then he agreed to one meeting. Then he said, and then he brings out this disastrous $6.9 trillion budget, which would be unconscionable to do to the American people. So I think you're going to see Republicans united with demanding and requiring cuts in spending. That's our number one responsibility as the House, to protect the financial solvency, the economic solvency of the country, and to protect our borrowing capability and our spending ability. And we're gonna exercise that responsibly, and we are going to cut spending.
Congressman Bob Good, Republican of Virginia, member of the Budget Committee. Thank you for your perspective this morning.
Thank you for having me. Great to be with you.